Hello folks! Today we are going to paint up a handy dandy little... Oh, a death card from the previous one that I made. Pretty cool, huh? So, starting things off, I'm actually going to paint this in a little unorthodox way and not use the simple color for color parts. I'm actually going to be doing mixes and different ways of blending and showing you all sorts of different ways on how to paint your grimily niggly boy. Here. Alright. So I'm just getting my paints started here. Grab a little dry brush tower. So what I'm going to be starting off with is, since it has the black base coat, I'm going to be giving it a dark neutral coat before I start applying all the highlights. So I'm going to do a combination of a neutral green, which in this case will be the Castellan green, and then a neutral brown, which will be Steel Legion drab. And this is going to give us our kind of Death Guard green-esque base coat, while also applying just a smidge of matte black, just to tone it down a little bit so I get that nice, good, dark coverage so I can build upon from there. So I'm going to be mixing the colors into a 1-to-1 ratio on my palette here, grabbing my good old faithful, this little dry brush I had from a bigger brush that has served me well over the years. So as you can see here, we got ourselves a nice dark, like military Death Guard green almost. I'm just going to be dry brushing this all over the model. Just using my little towel here and whisking off any excess I don't want. I'm just going to be dry brushing the whole model. You can be as sloppy or as direct with this as you want. This is just going to give us the base tones on top of the black we have created already. Now with that done, we have our good base tone with that dry brush of dark military green on top of the black. Almost kind of gives us a little Dark Angel look. Now that I look at this, it's kind of funny. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch out the neutral brown. Sorry, the neutral green, I'm going to switch out for a tan here. This is going to be Ushap di Bone. I'm going to be mixing these together with just a smidge, I mean just a smidge, of Moot Green, possibly like a 1-to-1 to half ratio, and see how this works. So now, we have the three colors there. I'm just going to be mixing them on my little palette. So I get that nice, neutral, like, kind of gross green tan look that you see for the Death Guard. As we have right here. And I'm just going to be dry brushing and stippling this on the most upper surfaces of the model so I get that good color variation. Generally, when you're working with these shoulder pads, it's good to do a circular motion, so you get a nice soft blend, almost like you're painting it on, but not too much. The hand, I can just sort of just dry brush it. Now that we have our nice, like, dusty, like, green color. It's like a green tan almost, like a beige. We are now going to be using the same mix, but removing the darker brown and sticking with the moot green and the Ushapti bone, so we get the most brighter highlights while still keeping that subtle greenish tan look on the model. So as previous, I'm going to do a 1-to-1 mix. Just 1 part moot, 1 part Ushapti, or I keep saying it with a P, but it's Ushapti. So that way, once I start dry brushing it on the model, it's going to look pretty good. As you see there, we kind of have like a bright Death Guard green almost going on. Now that I have the mix, I'm going to mix it with the previous color just to set the tone down a little bit. Now I'm just going to do the same thing, but stippling more and focusing it more in the centers and the sides. As we have here, it's adding some really good light definition to the model. Like it's really starting to brighten things up and give us a good transition overall. With the dry brushing, it's okay to be a little patchy and kind of streaky, as this will complement the overall look we're going for with our Death Guard. Give it a pretty nice look overall. Now here's the models coming out so far. I say it looks pretty well. Sure, it's a little bright at first, but once we start applying the overall grimy wash later and some other highlights, it's going to really change and update it to a more preferred grimy dark tone of the Death Guard. Now, with our current mix, we're going to keep it as it is in the second one here, where it's the brighter tone, where there's a little more green, and we're just going to add, just slightly add, a little hint of mummy robes or whatever very light off-white color you have, just to brighten it up a bit for the final, like, stippling highlighting. Because once we put the wash over it, it's going to blend it all together pretty well and allow us to have better places to apply the finishing highlights we will do later. So as you see there, it made it a very bright, like almost tan more than green, which is totally good. That's what we're going for here. We're just going to be gently applying that tone to the uppermost part of where we want the light to catch. So I'm going to be saying if the light's coming from there, top of his helm's going to be catching it. Give a little accent there, here, a little bit there, some right here, there. Now overall, what I'm showing you here is just mainly a dry blending, dry brush method of painting to knock out a lot of your models and get them to a really good tabletop standard. And really, all it is just lots of dry brushing, somewhat dry blending, almost like you're applying makeup. Let me just do a little bit of splotching there. Highlight there. Get a little bit there, but not too much. And then that's pretty good. That's how he's looking so far. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to use that same color we have going on here and mix a little bit of a neutral purple to sort of like color all the little flesh bits you kind of see protruding from the body. But actually, before we do that, when I'm thinking about it, I'm going to quickly paint all the little bone parts that you see on the model, like the skulls here, the little horn, some of the little protrusions coming out on the hand there, and then we'll paint all the little fleshy bits. Now, genuinely, I want this bone color to be a little bright compared to the rest of it. So we're going to be using our mix of Steel Agent Drab and Ushabti Bone, similar to what we were doing to get the green tan tone. And we're just going to be applying that as a 1-to-1 mix, so 1 part of the brown and 1 part of the tan, and just mix it together evenly so we can use that as our base tone for all of the bone parts. So when we put the wash on, it would help darken them a little bit so we can start building up our values from there. So this here gives us that nice, like, creamy, like, leathery brown color. I'm just gonna paint it onto the horn here. And paint it on the skulls. Just being very gently, not to mess up too much those nice color variations I got building up on the armor. If a little bit of brown gets on them, it's alright. We'll just add some, it will add some nice value to the model when we apply the wash. That's how it's looking so far. Pretty nifty if I don't say so myself. I'm going to apply it to these little nubs on this little shoulder pad here. Okay, now we will be keeping that mix and adding the neutral purple. So for me, I'm going to be using Phoenician Purple or any other neutral purple tone that you have that's somewhat dark, opaque. And this will mix in nicely with the 2 tan colors we have going on here. That will create a nice, like, offsetted flesh tone that we can use to paint all these little bits and bobs kind of hanging about. Just gonna mix them on my palette here real quick. Here we are. That's how that color's looking. A nice kind of like purpley gray. Adds a really nice little color definition to it too. I'm just going to start painting on this to all the little tendrils and stuff you see lying about. Very so gently. Now for the next part, I'm going to be applying a sort of a gray black, which is known as Corvus black, or any other like grayish black tone that you can find. And I'm going to apply it to the little tubes around the backpack, the face, right here, and as well as the blade itself and the gun. So we can get started on highlighting those parts as well later. Get some Corvus black on my little palette here. I'm just going to be applying it to all the little spots. We're going to apply it to a little belt here. Get to work on that. Just softly evening that out. And since this is a nice dark gray, it will blend in well with the black base tone we have set prior. with that same Corvus black mixed with a little bit of the mid-tone brown, I'm going to add just a smidge of Mephiston red to that mix so I can use it and apply it to paint any cloth on this model. Mixing the red in with these colors will give us a nice off-tone like brown burgundy color. As you can see there. I'm just going to use this all over that cloak of his. Just paint it up. Now, while that part is drying, I'm going to paint all the metal parts by doing a 1-to-1 mix of Castelic Bronze with Lead Belcher, and this will give us a nice off-tone, sort of archaic-looking metal. Kind of like when you hold a doorknob for many years and that doorknob starts getting this weird kind of like brass-like silver tinge on whatever paint metal that they used. Just going to mix those two together here. That'll give us a nice, good metal color. And I'm just going to paint all the metal parts with this. So as you see there, it gives us that nice tone that I'm looking for. Just going to paint all of these parts with it. Now you can use any kind of silver and brass color to set this up for the coloring. So you can do that any way you like. And now before the wash stage, I am going to gently dry brush a light tan onto all the tan flesh parts as well as some of the purple. So that way we get those defined and ready to go once we apply the wash onto the model. By using Ushabti Bone. With a hint of, not matte white, of mummy robes. So that way the off-white will help increase the light tone. Now I honestly kind of forgot the saturation, desaturation, like which one's which. So I'm just going to refer to these as lighter or darker tones. Gets a degree in art, totally forgets how to art. Alright, so that's kind of how that's going to be looking once I start applying it. I'm only going to focus it on these parts right here. And don't worry too much about the semi-dusty effect. That will go away once we apply the wash. Going to dry brush the bottom of this and then build it upwards. Give us a nice soft gradient. Just dry brush the very tips of those spikes. Top of the horn. Inner parts of that power claw. power claw, power fist, and then the parts on that blade. I just removed it briefly so I can have an easier time highlighting these little parts on the gun itself. Alright, there we go. And now here comes the fun part. Ruining it with a wash. Nah, that's alright. It's supposed to get all grimy and stuff once I apply the wash. So I'm going to use a large brush here. And I'm going to do a 1-to-1 mix of a known oil or whatever other black wash you have, and a Agrax Earthshade or whatever dark brown wash you have, like Army Painter Flesh Tone and Black Tone or whatever those are called. And you're just simply going to mix those together in a 1-to-1 mix. And you're simply going to apply this to your model as a whole. This will help darken the tone of everything while also adding some definition. And with all those highlights we've built up, those will help transition very well with the blending process. And with the wash applied, it will nicely help make it look less dusty. So I'm just going to be applying the wash all over to the model. It's alright if some of it pools. Don't feel too bad about that. That'll actually add some nice variation. It's Death Guard. And you can already see with that wash applied, it's starting to darken those nicely. Give it a really cool, grimy look. On the tan green that we've developed, on the skulls, the armor, everything really. Now that that is dry, here's how the model's looking, and I actually really like how that came out. Now honestly, you can leave it here, and it will be perfect for tabletop standard, aside from coloring the base. But you can just leave it here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start highlighting all the parts on a model with the lighter base tones I've applied prior, as well as adding some little special effects here and there with some inks and other colors. So first I'm going to start off with highlighting the dampened archaic brass looking parts with a brass scorpion, which will be very lighter and easily help offer a difference in tone. So I'm going to do very light edge highlight on the uppermost part of the shoulder pad. It's not noticeable at first until you start looking at it at different angles and it starts shining brighter than the rest of it. Just very subtle highlights. Now for the highlights on the green armor, now that that prior scorpion highlight has been added, I'm going to do a moot green mummy robes mix to highlight that dark toned green armor. Since mummy robes is a nice off-white tan pigment, it's gonna help highlight these parts nicely. I just want to highlight around the rim. And it's good having your model on these little cork other ones so I can highlight it easier. As well as the very tip ends of these little spikes here. So you guys added some nice color variation. I'm going to highlight the claws here. Well defined. It's almost with how the brush is right now, I'm kind of using it as like a streak dry brush to kind of add some variation, as you see there with like the little etches. It's almost like a little cross hatching motion, just to add a little variety. Then we'll be back after all that highlighting is done. And now that the highlights are done, I'm going to be highlighting all the bone parts using that same color but mixed with a little bit more of the Ushabti bone, so I can start building up the layers of tan to make it look more like bone. I'm just gonna ever so slightly kind of just stipple feather because the brush is a little wet. Just gonna feather it on a little bit here. Same with the skulls. Just highlighting on those ridges there. Just kind of stipple on that there. It's a nice worn out, grimy look going on here. I actually really like how this one came out. It's a good one. This one got a little too dark, but that's alright. We'll be changing that once we do OSL here. That looks pretty good too. And we'll add just a tinge more of that light mummy robe color and just dot the very tip of all these here. And you see the color tones with all that. A little more here, a little more there. Now, to highlight that blade of his, I'm going to do a mix of Warp Fiend Gray and whatever light color tone I have left on my palette, and just use it to brush highlight the blade here. I'm going to be swiping upwards, but like he's catched anything there. There. Instant gray blade. We're going to be adding some speckles of silver in there too, but while we still have it on our brush here, I'm going to quickly dry brush the terrain with this tan gray. that out of the way now that I'm thinking about it. That terrain takes it pretty well. And the nice cool color of that is offsetting the slight warm tones we've applied to the model. Now I'm going to add just a smidge more of the rummy mummy robes onto my palette here to make that gray even brighter, and just focus it more on the parts where it will catch light. So we can just finish off the little base here, since some of our colors from when we were painting splotched onto it, which adds a nice accidental color shift. So I'm just going to be highlighting these real quick here with that bright off-white. Kind of change the tone a bit. Stipple it on. Make it all nice and gray. As the kids would say, grimdark. And then I'm just going to add just a little bit more to finish off the final highlights on that base of ours. Just hit certain points on it. Since I'm not focusing too hard on making this look pretty, as this is just the base for the model. The dry brushing though will help bring out a lot of that detail. Has a nice stone color to it. And before I work on the rest of the model, I'm just going to give that a quick handy-dandy non-oil wash. The standard for all model painting. Honestly though, black washes, just really black and brown, or black and brown washes, seem to do the trick on a lot of things, really, and help bring out that value and saturation affection front force. I'm just going to slather this all over that base. I'm going to be a little messy about it too. Alright. And then, with whatever's left on my thing here, I'm going to add some subtle streaks onto the armor. Like stuff has been seeping out from battle damage over time. Selecting certain points on the model. Especially on that hand. Oh yeah, that's coming together well. Should we even put some on that blade of ours? And now, for the second part, we are going to be dry blending that cloak of his. So currently it's using a nice kind of reddish brown. So I'm going to be mixing one part of the Steel Legion drab with one part of the Mephiston red, just to finish off those final highlights. So that way we can get to the last part, which is the gun. Almost kind of looks like terracotta clay a little bit with these two mixed together. So I'm just going to simply brush it along on the uppermost ridges here. Kind of work my way down, selecting certain key points that would have less wear and tear. You see it adds a little bit of color change. Just really get these tips here. Then I'm going to add just a little bit of white to give ourselves almost like a pink brown, just to finish off that lighter highlight. I'm just going to stipple it on. Make it look all patchy, like dirt and grime's been collecting on it. Maybe just aim for that knee there, the weird bulbous thing. Now for the final part, the backpack. Not backpack. The gun. The plasma gun. The good old misfire and your dude's dead. Oops. I'm just trying to find a color here. Here we are. I'm going to grab that Warp Fiend Gray we had previously, mix it with that color we've created prior, so we get this nice kind of pink off tone a little bit, which will complement that gun casing very well with the colors we've applied previously. I'm just going to carefully kind of stipple on the brighter color. Same goes for all the tubing and the tendrils that you see kind of lying about. This will help highlight those very nicely. And now, I'm going to show you a neat little trick here. Showing you how this guy's looking so far. Pretty good if I say so myself. Now, I am going to grab my matte white and thin it down just a little bit so it can seep into all those cracks and stuff on the part where I want this to do the glow effect. But not thin it down too much where it becomes like water. I still want it to actually color that spot. I'm going to gently paint it and the rim ever so slightly, like so. And I'm going to let that dry, and we'll get to work on the OSL and highlighting effects. And now to finish things off, I'm going to be using a mix of Moot Green and Flash Gets Yellow, and thin it down to an almost wash consistency. So that way, it will give us the proper nice little color that we're going for with the green plasma. And you can have it go either way. You can have it be a little more green, or you can have it a little more white. You can have it be a little more yellow, depending on how much you mix in. But genuinely, these two mix together really well. It's actually the color mix I use for my Necrons when it comes to their green. Just use this thin down on the white, and you got yourself instant green energy. See, it's already doing that effect. Super simple. Just apply it. Leave it how it is. And then, with the amount that we have left on our palette here, I am going to dry brush around the area and give it a very subtle OSL effect. Now, OSL real quick is object source lighting. It's generally what you see a lot in miniature painting and other art mediums where something is refracting light and it's glowing around the area. So I'm just gonna highlight that skull there in a circular motion. See with that there. While using a little bit of wetness to my advantage. Because once this dries, it's gonna look pretty cool. And a little bit on the lower jaw there. Building up, same with that power pack. Just give it a nice general stipple in a circle. Too much on that side. There we go. The closer it is, the brighter it is, the farther it goes, the lighter it gets. Or should we say darker? And there we are. One tabletop ready, pretty well defined Death Guard model. And he came out pretty cool if I say so myself. And I hope my buddy likes this as well too, because I painted up for this for him. Other than that, thank you for stopping by, folks. I hope you enjoy painting your plague-ridden Marines and striving for the Chaos Gods of Nurgle and all that fun jazz. And have a good day and continue painting. Peace.